Welcome to the Six Conditions podcast, where we explore the science and art of great teams. Join show hosts Drs. Ruth Wageman and Krister Lowe for pithy summaries of great research being done on teams and organizations, as well as inspired and artful approaches for using those ideas to enable brilliant collaborations. Let's get today's conversation started.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Six Conditions podcast, where we're exploring the science and art of great teams. Great to have you back, Ruth, and we have two special guests today, Gabe Abella and Adam Hsu. Ruth, how are you? It's been a while since we had an episode.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Great to be with you, Krister, and with Gabe and Adam. Excited about the conversation we're going to be having today.
Yeah, which is going to be about organizational agility and the six conditions. And so before we introduce Gabe and Adam, though, we like to usually start off these episodes with a little bit of banter about what's going on. But what's been on your mind, Ruth, these days about teams? And
I'm not sure it's going to count as banter, but like a lot of people, what's on my mind is the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and the challenges that it's creating for everyone, from families to small workplaces to large organizations. And a couple of weeks ago, we put out an offer from our faculty as people who have real expertise in developing great teamwork to support the work of frontline practitioners in particular who are dealing with the pandemic. And I've had the privilege of working with a couple of different teams right now, a critical care unit in the UK, as well as a respiratory clinic in the US. And I am really inspired and amazed by these teams are killing it. When you look at them on the six conditions, they have gone from a completely different work design before the pandemic to really creating conditions for themselves to excel as teams. And it's been really exciting to sort of help coach them along a little bit and help support their work. But they did a tremendous amount to become great teams. And what really has struck me as a theme in both of them is how empowered they are feeling in their work, which is not normally how frontline healthcare workers feel. They're feeling like they have lots and lots of latitude to just make really good decisions for their patients in a way that hasn't before. So a lot of our conversation is about how do you sustain that as we hopefully start moving towards a different and new normal. But really just a great question, which is, what do you take that you learned from how you're operating now, and how do you preserve the excellence that you were able to achieve and the autonomy? So that's what I've been thinking about and feeling inspired about. So how about you, Krister? How's the world
really landed on you? I've been joining you with the one of those respiration teams, and actually it links up a little bit to, I think, what we're going to talk about with the guys today. And I've learned a lot from them about visual management and challenging the way we approach working with teams and using technology and accelerating and just being very experimental with how we approach working with teams. So I think the context though of COVID-19, social justice that's going on, there's just a lot of things that are demanding attention beyond just helping organizations build profitable enterprises, right? That the interconnectedness of the world is demanding a level of attention beyond just profitability, right? And it's about health, it's about inclusion, it's about how do we actually build a sustainable world for 8 billion people. And so I'm finding these times really challenging. I'm also, hoping that there's a silver lining in this, and it's going to we're going to come out of this better people. But I think this may be a good time to transition over to welcome Gabe and Adam a bit more and give you guys some brief introductions and welcome you onto the show. We have two really great colleagues that we've gotten to know over the last few years. We have Gabe Abella and Adam Hsu. They're both organizational agility practitioners. They work inside of enterprises, and they've been great proponents of the Six Conditions framework, but we've also learned a ton of them. They've been my teachers in many areas around organizational agility and Kanban in particular. And so they bring a wealth of experience about, how to do this at scale. So team of teams really leading the charge of, scaling up teaming to really ultimately transform organizational outcomes. Gabe, I love your bio on LinkedIn. It's the best bio ever. It's one sentence. And because of that, I appreciate it. I have to read it. It says, Gabe Abella, enabling organizational agility at enterprise scale by leading, coaching, and teaching, period. I love that. What more do you need to say? So you say it all there. And I'll just briefly introduce your colleague, Adam, and then we'll let you guys round out the introduction. Adam, your bio is a little bit longer, so I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. But Adam, you're also an accredited Kanban consultant, trainer, and coach. You're a speaker and systems thinker and career mentor. You've got lots of great stuff. I'll just direct people over to LinkedIn to check out more. Trained in lots of different agile approaches and team effectiveness approaches. But guys, welcome to the show. And what else would you like to say about yourselves and what you do here at the outset?
Well, thank you for the introductions, Krister, and just honored to spend some time with you and Ruth as well as Adam today. I just want to get one piece of housekeeping out of the way. Both Adam and I work for JP Morgan Chase, but we also want to be very clear that the opinions that we're expressing on this podcast are our own and not those of JP Morgan Chase. So with that, Krister, thanks for giving me a thumbs up on my very brief LinkedIn bio.
Very lean.
I just think, just to add to that, really, I mean, my passion is around helping people feel rewarded and respected in the workplace because we spend so much time, oftentimes more hours in the day, face-to-face with our colleagues than we are with our own families. So if we're going to spend that much time together, can we make it fruitful? Can we make it healthy? Can we make it rewarding? So that's really my passion for wanting to help organizations at scale.
Great. And likewise, Krister and Ruth, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here and very excited to be on today's podcast. And a little background about myself is, aside from my LinkedIn profile, I share with most people that they don't know I'm a father of 6 children. So I have a embedded team that I'm a part of all the time, and my passion and what kind of drives me is understanding how different dynamics and different personalities come together. All my kids, you would think they come from different parents, but they all have so much to teach me. So
wow.
I love the 6 conditions because a lot of that appears in my own family.
Wow.
And the way I help guide them and lead them.
Wow. So you're really living and breathing teams both at home and at
yes.
work. Yeah, I hope you're an extrovert. Right? So you love being with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no choice.
Yeah, exactly. You got to be. Well, guys, I know you're both in Florida, and that's where you guys are, and so that's great. Why don't we start off just by warming up a bit around telling the audience just about kinds of work you're doing, what you're passionate about these days in your work, and we can do that to warm up, and then we'll pivot a bit into how do you come across the 6 conditions framework and how is that creating value for you guys. But let's start with a bit of what you're up to these days.
What I've been focusing on mostly these days is helping the enterprise get better through agility, mainly through how they collaborate with each other. Right now, there's a huge movement, obviously, going towards agility, but it's very hard to overcome the system effects of an enterprise. So, of course, the enterprise has its own rules and its own way of working, and it's many times hard to overcome some of those things. So I've been focusing on how do we help the dynamics of those separate teams. They all have clearly stated goals of trying to get better, trying to collaborate better, and things like that. But they're also realizing that they have too much work in the system, right? And a lot of that works against them. So we're trying to help them evolve a little bit of their thinking. By using visualization techniques, as you mentioned earlier, Krister, but they need to do it also at scale, not just on the team level. So we've been helping do some of that and making leadership aware of some of those things that they may not see at the surface level. So that's been a lot of the work I've been doing. So things I've been recently passionate about is just the overall. So we work in systems, and how if you have a system, people tend to after being in a system, tend to game the system after a while. So that's kind of been my natural curiosity about systems.
Mm-hmm.
This is what drew me to anything system-oriented, systems
Mm-hmm.
thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always a bad thing. It's more of this is the natural human tendency to want to figure out how to get the best of their own situations. So
Mm-hmm.
we saw the pandemic crisis happen recently, over the last few months, and you saw some of these system effects start to take effect, and people going out scrambling to buy all the cleaning supplies and all the toilet paper and all these. So you're wondering what's going on there, and there's a human psychology behind it. People tend to want to get as much as they can from the system. So that's kind of been my passion. I've always thought about maybe one day creating a little blog and then posting it out there and say, hey, if you've ever seen examples of real world people trying to game systems, let's kind of collect those examples and kind of share what we've seen and why those things are happening. So that's kind of been my passion recently.
That's really, I'm fascinated by that. I think you should create a blog like that. I think it would be full of lessons learned. You use the term game the system, and that could be people finding ways in which the way the system is set up could serve their interests, right? And find, even if it wasn't intended to do it that way. But then the other version is trying to get around the system in order to survive and do what you need to accomplish in your workplace anyway. And I hope we'll talk more about that, about the idea that organizations, structures, and systems place obstacles in the way of what we're asking people to do. And how do you help people who are trying to do the work exercise influence on the system in ways that it gets healthier? That to me is a really fascinating question in what you're raising there. So thanks, Adam.
Nice. All right. What about you, Gabe? What have you been working on these days that you're excited about?
Yeah, the thing that's really been interesting to me and sparking my motivation is really helping teams collaborate with each other. So inter-team collaboration, which I think is an interesting challenge. It's already not a trivial matter to help team members collaborate with each other, but then how do you then join up forces with other members of teams and multiple teams to complete some pretty challenging tasks. And so that's really what I've been really kind of motivated to do and learn about how to also introduce some instrumentation, like how can we visualize dependencies across organizations, interdependencies, get the data we need to make good decisions about how to improve the flow of work or make good business decisions about what we can and can't do, not just within one team, but across many teams. And that's so many target-rich areas to explore and so many opportunities to experiment. So really, really excited about being able to do that.
And when you say organizations, you mean inside of one company, different parts of the organization, or?
Yeah. So if for large enterprises, which feel like one giant company or multiple giant companies, there's so many dependencies and so many expectations around, or many requirements as to how you can complete a piece of work. Not much work can be done in a silo. You're going to have to interact with other people and other teams. So
just to set some boundaries a bit. So when you guys are working with these nested systems of teams, are we talking about like dozens of people, dozens of teams, hundreds of people? What's the scale and scope? I think that might be helpful because I think for a lot of listeners, maybe just getting their arms around how do I work with one team, and you guys are working with lots of teams. So I'm curious about the scale and complexity.
Yeah, so the teams of teams that we tend to work with are part of the larger enterprise. And each team, again, there's a natural tendency because they are dealing in agile. They tend to be no bigger than individual teams, no bigger than 10 people. They try to keep it size below that. And typically they fall within some sort of domain that's around 5 or 6 teams typically working at scale in some sort of scaling model. So then through those, there may be other departments where they also have a similar structure as well. They have 5 or 6 teams, of which there are 7 to 10 people on each. So those are typical scales that we deal with across the enterprise.
And you might get 5 or 6 teams collaborating with another set of 5 or 6 teams across. That's what you mean by across organizations.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think like where you draw the boundaries is interesting, because you could draw the boundaries around 5 teams, or you could say that these 100 teams are in one way or another interdependent, right? And it's not, so maybe one department is dependent on the services of one or more teams. So I think it's a great question, Krister, because we have to stop and take a breath and say, okay, if we're going to jump into the system, where are the boundaries? Are we just looking at what we call a platform? Is it a platform of 5 teams, or is it a platform interdependent with 2 other platforms? So that's 30 teams total. Every time you jump in, you're like, all right, well, what's the work we're trying to accomplish here? Who are the customers? You're asking that question every single time. You're trying to get your bearings on, okay, what is the system we're actually trying to define and establish interactions for.
I love that. I think, for many of the listeners on the show, that probably sounds daunting. And I can appreciate that as you're moving into this kind of work, you're dealing with organizational change dynamics and, some of those things that you were talking about earlier, Adam. But I'm curious about your journeys. Have you guys always been working with large scale systems like that? Or what was your journey to get there? Because I think for many of us, just learning to work with one team is a multi-year journey. And then trying to work with lots of teams, that's a whole nother developmental challenge and hurdle to get over.
Yeah, I can start with my journey. Again, my personal background, having been on a team of developers myself. So I kind of had that context coming in. And then I took a traditional route for most people who are in tech. They tend to go towards project management. So I was looking across the enterprise for a long time and helping to manage projects across in that context. And then stepping into a role more of a coach, if you will, and then going back to single team, right? So that seems to be a very common path for many people in at least the IT industry. You start off small with coaching one team, and then you start branching out into, well, maybe I can help this other team also improve what they're doing. And from there, it just kind of you start getting requests from other teams who also need help. So then found myself at the opportunity to actually help more than one team. So once you start helping more than one team, you're already starting to work at scale. So that was an interesting thing to understand, that a lot of the things that when you first begin your journey, there's so much focus on the single team, especially in the world of Agile. A lot of the framework, a lot of the ground rules, a lot of the guardrails we give is to help those single teams. And then you have to start thinking in terms of larger challenges and other core norms that have to, deal with more than one team. Just because you have agreements with this one team, how do you start helping 2 teams that don't necessarily interact but have to live in the same role? And that's always been a challenge. So that was kind of what actually started to draw me towards the 6 conditions, realizing that, hey, other teams have their own structure, their own rules and things that they have to do to make their team work. And they don't necessarily have to jive with each other. So that was a good introduction for me.
That's a really cool insight. And it just strikes me when you describe your background that, a lot of people that I've met who are team development professionals started by being individual coaches and then moved into work with teams, and that their histories and their experience don't set them up to understand interdependence in a really deep way, what it's like to work in teams all the time, or to experience the larger system of teams in the context of the work. And so you did all that and had that sort of perspective from doing the work, and then were able to sort of step back and bring that kind of perspective in the work that you're doing now. That's a very cool journey towards this kind of work. So
yeah.
And I have a similar journey as well. So from team member to team leader to project manager, program manager. And I think what's interesting as I reflect on it right now, once you get to the program, you're managing large programs, literally hundreds of people trying to collectively achieve some goal. It actually, we're still trying to solve the same problems, but we think we're bringing more modern, thoughtful, techniques that really account for the complexity of the work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, like literally the problems were the same 20 years ago, right? The question is, do we think we're a little bit smarter? Yeah, we've got some more techniques brought out, but I don't think we still yet have this appreciation for how complex the social system is, and then the effects of changes in the environment have on those people in the social system. So I think that's, so like at my instruction again is at the team level, and where we started was helping others have great teams, right? And then there was just this stopping point, like, okay, well, we've run out of HBR articles to forward you, right? There's only so many good tips we can give you before we're like, all right, well, now we're getting on the edge of our learning here. We're on the edge of our our clients' learning, and they're like, all right, well, what else is next? And we're like, oh, well, I don't know. So that started on this 16 conditions journey, and we found out there was so much more, which we're excited to. We're still learning. Still learning now, but there's so much work that's been done by you, Ruth, and of course J. Richard Hackman that we're just rediscovering, which is crazy. I hate to say that, like, we're rediscovering. That's so rich.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later on, but I think that's...
Well, why don't we get into that now? So what was it? How did you come across the 6 conditions, and what attracted you to it?
Yeah. So once we got to a point where we're helping a bunch of teams and to leaders and again, running out of the tried and true reason, things, like have better meeting agendas, trust each other more, all the classic stuff. I mean, it's all good stuff,
right?
But that stuff ends up running its course. And you're like, right, I'm running out of tricks and tips. So we always started doing a lot of reading, and I noticed for almost all the reading I was doing related to either learning about agile teams or teams in general, or even not even teams, just the same name keep coming up over again in the preface, in the foreword, in the footnotes, in the endnotes, in the big block reading was J. Richard Hackman.
Yeah.
Anyone who knew anything about, or at least it ended up being my sort of litmus test for how good this book was. Like, if you couldn't actually refer to any of Richard's work, I don't think you did. I think there's probably more work to be done, or you have some novel idea that hasn't yet been tested by, the rest of the world. So that was it for me. Is like, all right, his name is showing up everywhere. What's going on here? And then that led me to Ruth's work and to you, Krister, through your podcast. And so I'm still uncovering his name in amazing places. And Ruth, I think every time we talk, Ruth, you're like, have you read Richard's article on this? And I'm like, no, I haven't.
Yes, it was last time it was learning more by crossing levels. Yeah.
So
Gabe, I've been working with Ruth really closely for 3 years, and I'm still discovering stuff that I just when I think I've kind of got, most of what's in the tank, there's always more layers and levels and articles I never even heard of.
So
that are game changers. They're not just like cursory little, articles, but.
Well, I was thinking when you guys were explaining earlier what your calling is, what you care about, why are you passionate about this work? And, a lot of the themes about being energized and respected in your workplace. I mean, that's what Richard was studying all his life, which is what are the things in workplaces that enable people to feel a great sense of accomplishment and fulfillment in their work. And, so that goes way back to his work on the design of jobs, the design of work itself. And then it's pervasive in his work on teams, where the way that he defines an effective team is never just about, does it produce or does it please management? It is always also about, is this a team in which they get better and better over time and really contribute to the learning and growth and well-being of the individual members.
Let's get a little bit more granular and practical here, and kind of get into a little bit more in detail around this topic of organizational agility and where the 6 conditions comes in for you guys. But it might be good to start that by just really bottom line in a sentence. What do you mean by organizational agility for those listening who that may be a new term? What is that in a bottom? I'm sure we could do a whole episode unpacking what that is, but how do you guys describe that to lay people? What is really organizational agility?
I would probably have to link it more to, and again, something that we're the end goal of what agility is meeting the outcomes of what the customers need at the time they need it most, and having an organization be able to service that as quick as possible.
Okay.
That's why the word agility comes in, is being quick to respond to the needs of the customer. For me, that's what organizational agility is.
But mobilizing a whole organization or part of an organization to respond to customer needs in a more nimble way and a faster way and more effective way.
Yeah. I mean, if I were to bottom line it, the words adapting and collaborating at scale. And adapting is hard, and then collaborating is not trivial, and then scale breaks everything.
Yeah.
So you're just talking about like really, really hard things to bring together. And I think that's what's exciting about the work, because we still need to figure this thing out.
Right.
So that's,
But a lot of this movement came out of software development, right? That there was a need to move from traditional project management approaches, which were just, as you scaled up bigger and bigger projects, or, trying to meet customer needs, that the traditional management methods were not working, right? And that's what I think led to a lot of the disruption around the Agile movement, right?
Well, I think the thing that the breakthrough that I think Agile management brought was just the acceptance of uncertainty. Whereas almost all management methods ahead of that try to ignore it or try to design it out, and you can't design it out. You have to actually be accepting of it, and because it also came out of software development, where they're doing highly complex work, where there is no right answer. Also, finding a customer is also, there is no right answer. There is no point A to point B to find. That's also a complex problem. And so understanding that uncertainty exists in those areas, how can we change the way we work and view that problem accordingly, such that we don't pretend that there's a plan, or don't plan that there's a checklist to get you from A to B. I think that's really what the power that sort of Agile management brings to the work.
Nice. So where does the 6 conditions then come into that? I think probably the listeners are very familiar with a lot of Agile principles and practices, visual management, working in cadences and rhythms, and these kinds of things, but self-managing teams and such. But how does the 6 conditions come in there for you guys, and what attracts you to that framework?
So for me, pretty much the 6 condition, I like the term that Gabe many times uses, is it's a container for a lot of the things that Agile already professes, right? So Agile, of course, rooted in Lean, comes from a culture of respecting the individuals that are doing the work, and never being satisfied with just, all right, we've gotten to the best of our best. There's always something better. So the continuous improvement language is always there. So it doesn't matter which framework you're talking about in Agile. Most of it is based on a Lean root basis. And where it comes in with the 6 conditions is, you can see the 6 conditions are pretty much, it's a natural complement to those principles of what Lean is about, and how we're trying to size the team in the right way. So with the sound structures, we're trying to design the team to be the right size. We're making sure that we're actually creating the work for the team, by the team, right? With task design and the norms that you have in there. So a lot of Agile frameworks are very explicit about making sure that you're calling out what the team has agreed to. So many Agile teams have team agreements or program agreements if they're at scale, that they themselves declare and say, this is the way we want to work. So that we don't, step on each other's toes and get into the problems that most teams get into. So I see so much of the 6 conditions, again, naturally complement some of the design of what the frameworks of Agile's.
So it helps explain why some of the Agile practices work, right? It gives some conceptual, underpinnings or understanding to those things.
Yeah, if I was to add on to what Adam was saying, I mean, from the respect for people, you could see that from the definition of team effectiveness, right? Member satisfaction, right? Are you getting something out of it, getting something out of being in this team? But the other thing that I think Agile amplifies is around the customer focus. So are we really satisfying the needs of a customer? And then the other thing is sustainability. It shows up in different areas, in Lean and in Scrum. They talk about sustainable pace. So how can it be a place that we can continue working? We're not burning out these teams. They're actually an asset, not a cost center, right? They're actually by growing with each other and becoming better and being healthy while they're doing it. That's an asset for the organization.
Yeah. And one other area that maybe we should highlight is anybody who's in Agile have probably heard this term over and over again: inspect and adapt. And so much of the 6 conditions is based on that emergence behavior that comes from a team. Like, you can't design it to be it until the team starts doing the work and they find more innovative ways to actually deal with the problem. And that shows up within obviously the emergence side of 6 conditions. Right. So inspecting and adapting is a huge part of the Agile culture, and understanding what is this problem, how do we approach it from a more experiment basis, and being okay with trying and failing and pivoting quickly to meet the needs of the customer. So again, natural complement there. Yeah.
I'm curious how you actually use it. I know, Gabe, I took a masterclass with you, an Agile team coaching masterclass that we held in New York City. And I remember in some of the training, you really shared when you're working with teams, you bring a lot of conditions thinking around really doing a lot of work on the front end of really slowing the teams down to design, and you run simulations even, but there's not just a focus on getting them going, but trying to shift mindsets. And so if I recall correctly, that's one of the places where you're bringing the 6 conditions in. But I'm just curious practically, whether you're using the Team Diagnostic Survey or the framework, where does it come in? Is it in the beginning? Is it in the middle, the end? Where, what are the different practical ways that it's showing up in your work? Aside from being just a helpful, conceptual or theoretical background knowledge base to have.
So I'll just share some examples and how I bring it. So to me, it's a lens. It's how you see things, and so the triangles, which I'm sure if reading all the articles and understanding, to me it's a lens, and it's a useful way to frame a problem, or at least it's a sense making tool. And so usually I'll give you an example. So I was working with a team, and by the way, so we work at the level of invitation. So it's not a launch. Sometimes it's not a launch. Right. Sometimes it is a launch. Sometimes it's, hey, there's something interesting here, or there's a big milestone coming up. But in this case, we were invited to work with the team, and they work, and we do run some exercises when we spend time with them, and they get a chance to elicit some of their concerns, their problems, their pain points. And it isn't necessarily a team diagnostic survey. It's more just an exploration. But even without actually running a team diagnostic survey, we're hearing things that line up with the framework. And so in this case, the team was saying that they were telling us, and actually their customers telling us, this team is the worst. They're terrible. Like, it takes 5 months to get something from them, and we work in cycles of 3 months and actually 2-week sprints, and we can't wait 5 months to do things. So essentially the customers were I think with what you're saying is the customers were doing workarounds. Instead of actually requiring the people that provide the service to do it, they're actually doing workarounds, and not really truly helpful if you're thinking about building a large platform or something that needs to be stable when people are doing workarounds. So we spent time with this team, and the team was saying, hey, when we get our work, it does take a long time. It's because there's not enough information when we first get the request, so we have to play back and forth. They have to ask them, and they don't understand the question, and then they reply via email and all this other stuff. And so it just plays, it's literally a telephone game over the course of months. So instead of actually getting a request and being able to start the work, they spend literally weeks and months just clarifying what the ask is. And it becomes super frustrating for the team, because essentially they know what to do. The team is highly skilled at what they're doing, right? It just don't have the information to start. So we spent time with this team to say, okay, well, is there a way in which you can work with your customer to change a customer contract, which is, instead of just sending over a question that says, I want a meal, would maybe something be more information be required? Like, hey, what kind of meal do you want? You want a vegetarian meal? Do you want a salad? What do you want? You want fake protein? Do you want a drink? So it's actually a way. So we're actually inviting the team to think about their customer contracts. So think about the information they need to do their work. You think about the norms that they have to establish with their customer, and say, okay, well, hey, we want to help you, and we know we can help you, but we can't do it until we understand your information more clearly. So can we could we have a design session? Could we have a sharing session? Instead of just you sending us an email, can we actually meet for 15 minutes to agree on what we're doing? And then also then thinking back from the purpose of this team, which is, do we really want to be telephone game people, or do we want to just we want to set ourselves up to really deliver the value that we're uniquely, brought together to do? So I think having a lens in which to do that, because that's otherwise we could again go back to the traditional ways. Okay, your customer is dissatisfied, so build more trust with your customer, or having more ways in which to look at it. So I think the term you used, Ruth, was like traverse the causal chain.
Yeah,
like we're just looking backwards. Once we say we're dissatisfied, we can work from right to left.
Yep.
Say what's really going on. So having that as a coach is extremely helpful. Like I don't feel like I'm completely flying blind. I have some ways to test whether the intervention is appropriate.
If I hear a few things in there, that stand out for me, Gabe, and I think you and I work in similar ways in that respect, which is you're hearing the complaint and you're sifting through, is that a symptom? Is that a sign that this team is actually ineffective? Which I think you would say yes, if the customer is chronically dissatisfied. And what might actually be driving that? So what I heard in the story that you just told is there's something going on in the relationship of the client to the team that prevents the team from having clarity of purpose. And without that fundamental driver, they cannot proceed, and they're continually cycling about that. So how do we change that interaction in a way that allows them to have a clear and compelling purpose to do this work for the client? I also heard some stuff about the norms of conduct. It was kind of cool to hear you talk about the relational norms between the client and the team. That's not one we hear come up a lot in the teams that we work in, and it seems like a really powerful way to work around the team structure stuff. But this idea of a lens, right, where that allows you to look at all the complexity of what's going on a team and place them in the framework in a way that says, where does the leverage lie? And if I act on this, what is actually going to get better?
Yeah, and just to put a bow on that story, I mean, so one of the things that we also do is organizational coaches look for high leverage interventions. So this team is actually shared service for 100 teams. So if you want to actually put a dent in the actual performance of an organization, look for the high leverage intervention. So we brought that team whose lead time was essentially down 5 months down to 2 weeks. So now you're talking about making a significant impact.
Wow.
But you need to look for those. You can help a lot of teams, but you want to look for the high leverage ones. Yeah. And you're finding out you don't need to hire new people. They don't need a new manager, right? Let's just take a look at how they're interacting with each other and their customers, and you'll find some really, really powerful.
Well, that's just kind of landing on me as, we talk a lot in the 6 conditions about conditions thinking about structure, driving behavior. And what you're describing there is a structure that was driving behavior that was a 5-month, a cycle. Whereas when you actually really got clear about what we're trying to create and design a good structure, it led to doing it in 2 weeks, which is just amazing. Adam, I'm curious what anecdotes are coming up for you or stories of how you've been using the 6 conditions with some of your interventions.
Sure. Actually, one story comes to mind, and it's the one that's, I think, stuck with me the longest since I've been applying the 6 conditions and the TDS assessment. I actually realized this, I would call it serendipitously. So what happens for the enterprise that we deal with, there's many times an opportunity to relaunch a team. For whatever reason. Usually it's an organizational change in leadership, or because they're working off of a new, in the Agile world, we call it a backlog, right? So a new owner of a particular domain. They have to kind of restructure the team or shuffle the teams around. And there was an opportunity to run a team diagnostic with the current leader as they were leaving. And I ran the diagnostic with actually 3 of their teams and got the results back. And as we got the results back, the new leader stepped in during this relaunch of the team. And I found, as well as the leader, found it very insightful as a way to help leaders really understand the context of the teams. What emerged in the TDS results were, I would say the report came out fairly well. I mean, there were a lot of green areas, but the one area that really stood out to them was the area of compelling purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You can clearly see it was orange, and so the new leader stepping in read the report and said, "Can we delve into this a little bit?" So we set up a coaching opportunity, and it gave the team and the leader an opportunity for dialogue. And what it came out to be was for this particular team, and I'm getting into a specific context, but this particular team had just recently underwent a lot of training. So they were learning about the cloud, and they all got their certifications for AWS, which is obviously very big out there. And the scores came really low when it came back to challenging. And the leader started just asking questions like, what's going on here? Why is this area such a concern? And what really emerged to that out of that conversation was we just went through all this training. We're really excited about getting an opportunity to apply new skills that we just obtained to the work that we do every day. But right now, we're not getting to do it.
There's no opportunity.
Yeah, so there was a strategic decision within the organization to kind of put it on hold because directionally they needed to kind of shift the way that they were going to focus on it. But the workers were all anticipating, this is the perfect opportunity for us to actually begin applying the skills that they value, and that's what actually keeps them engaged in the work. And they didn't have a way to actually express it until this coaching opportunity came to us. And then the leader said that, I'm so glad to hear that, because we could actually do something about it. Although the organization's not going to move in this direction right now, we can find opportunities for you to actually do something about it and not lose, let those skills become stale or not used. And for that was the right step in relaunching that team. And they were super excited after that conversation. And the leader really had a stage to actually begin having a really good dialogue, and it set the tone for them to continue that type of dialogue going forward. So for me, that gave me insight and said, whenever there's an opportunity for a relaunch, you may want to, approach a leader and say, hey, here's a very useful tool that can give you that that quick diagnostic to kind of say what's going on with this team. Is there something we need to consider as we're moving into a relaunch phase? So that was very powerful for me. And again, I would recommend it for anybody too, if you have that opportunity.
One of the things that I hear in that particular story is how much our work and ultimately how the 6 conditions framework helps you to set both a leader up for success and to set the team up for success, right? There's one-to-one work to do with leaders who have the authority and the responsibility for creating the purpose and engaging the team around that purpose and helping them develop good norms of conduct. We've seen in our research that's stuff that really belongs to the leader and is a really powerful influence. And it helps them step into their authority in a very constructive way, right? So what they're not doing is trying to clean up all the mess, right? And trying to coach a badly set up team to greatness, but really setting them up well. And then that's what enables the team to really show up in that conversation. Yeah.
Can I just add on to that, Ruth? Because this is the epiphany I had after reading your research, which is you can't coach a bad design team to greatness.
Yeah.
And this was a pivotal moment where I really had to rethink how I was engaging teams and organizations, which is we're playing around with the gardener metaphor, which I think we talked about, Ruth. I think Richard also talked about how you can be a gardener, a leader can be a gardener, and there are choices you make about having a team, and those are design choices that some of them you can't control, but some of them you can't control. But if I thought about if I have a garden, and I do have a garden, by the way, so I have been focusing on that during the pandemic. But there's choices you make. If you choose what you plant, you choose where you plant it. and you choose, how to prepare the soil and all those things. And so if I thought about my garden, where I put it, we put it in the back corner where it actually gets most of the sun. And we knew that that's a very important place to have a garden. They need full sun. And I had to fix my irrigation, make sure they get water. And if I had made a choice to plant my garden underneath on the shady side of my lot, the metaphor I have is there's no amount of watering and fertilizer I can provide to a garden that's in the shade where their plants require full sun. There's just no amount of water and fertilizer and insecticide and all the stuff that I can do to make this garden grow or reach its potential.
Talking to your plants.
Yeah, talking to your plants. Yeah, yelling at your plants, right? You can't even yell at your plants, right? So that really just made me think deeply about how also I spend my time with teams and leaders, which is, and I think about high leverage, which is your time as a leader best spent on trying to water the garden that's in the shade, or can we take a look at, can we move the garden to a better side of the lot here and get more full sun, or choose maybe shade tolerant type of work? I don't know. I think about that because I see leaders who deeply care. They deeply care about their people, right? This is amazing. I love it. This is what it inspires me when you see leaders deeply care about their people and they're not yet equipped with the tools to best support them. And just so this framework is just bring one or a few of these ideas into that, which is, again, Adam's perfect example, right? Which is just a few ideas here will help you really bring the best out of your team and not, I would say not be wasteful or say low leverage interventions. I look for high leverage interventions as a coach, high leverage interventions as a leader. That's what really kind of just flick the light bulb on for me with regards to the framework.
Nice. I know we're kind of burning daylight here, and we should probably start. That's the cue that we should probably start bringing this episode to a close. But I know you, in our last episode, recent episode, we were talking about authority structures in teams. So leader-led, self-managing, self-designing, and self-governing. And I've come across. I got to experience one of your designs, Gabe, around helping multiple, large group of people form multiple teams through a self-designing process. And I'd be curious, just, maybe as a quick anecdote for the group, as we start to move into working with multiple teams or team of teams and scaling, you do have this opportunity to really design the work system of multiple teams sometimes. And I'd love it if you could just share a little bit about that, the way you do that. How do you help a bunch of people where the project's big enough where it's going to need multiple teams, but not automatically assume you're going to assign those people to given teams, but let them assign themselves. And I'm curious if you'd speak a little bit to that, because I found that really fascinating and kind of a cutting edge experience for me, at least.
Sure. And I'll let, I absolutely invite Adam to pipe in as well, because we've done this work a lot. So one of the things that we do, we call it a self-forming event, a self-designing event. It's rooted on one really, really important principle, which is the people doing the work know best how to do it. And they probably also know best about their own skills and the skills of the people around them. So you don't necessarily need someone removed from the actual work to make decisions as, to play sort of like little chess or your own little fantasy football sort of way of, imagining teams coming together. Letting the people doing the work who are actually understand the challenges that the work requires to help self-organize. So we've done this in small groups. If you can form 2 teams with 12 people, do it, right? And then so we will run this exercise with them, which is helping people to elicit what their skills are as well as what we call their affinity. So just because someone has a skill and they're an expert at it, doesn't mean they want to be that person for the rest of their life. It doesn't mean that they want to be stuck with that type of work when they actually want to grow. So asking people what they want to do and where they want to grow is actually a super important part of forming a team, because they're going to get something out of it. They're going to get some member satisfaction by knowing they're not going to be the person stuck, taking notes for all of the meetings for the rest of their career, right? So that's really what's grounded into. And so we've done this with groups of up to 150 people across 4 continents. And it's just grounded in the fact that people know, people doing the work should make the decisions on how they're going to organize around it. And then the people in leadership should, their best leverage is around creating the environments for those people to do that work. Right. So again, looking at the 6 conditions. So I don't know, Adam, if you have anything else to add around our motivations for doing that and why it's so rewarding.
Yes. And I want to add on to what Gabe was laying the foundations for what we were doing there is the one thing I want to highlight is for doing this type of activity, leadership really has a major role to play in it. In order for it to work, it's a very very personal interaction for the people who are going through this activity to actually say, all right, I get to actually choose an identity that I get to be a part of. Some of the most amazing things that I've seen out in a workplace was through this activity. I've seen people who were previously managers of people step down from that position and say, I want to actually be part of a team again. Wow. As you know, many times in enterprise, the quickest way to kind of get promoted is through leading teams. But a lot of those people actually really miss the work. They're expert craftsmen of the things they do, and they've missed it so much that they said, you know what, I want to actually take a step back and become part of a team again. What was amazing to me was, I'll give you a little context of one of these activities we ran. When it first started, people who were the managers of the team, nobody would actually come and form with them, and that was a weird. They were partly expecting it, and partly a little, I would say, distraught by it. And then some honest conversations happen in the room where they actually have a conversation with the people they used to manage and say, listen, you know, I'm looking to be part of a team again. I have a lot to bring to the work that we do. I can actually help mentor and teach and provide that coaching on the ground, and because that's what I miss most. And through that honest conversation, all of a sudden people started forming around them. And that was probably one of the most successful team formings that I've seen. They were, after that, long-lived. They actually went through a very, I would say, tight bonding experience, and it kind of gelled them for a long time. So that's actually one of the things you look for when you have these teams form, is that they're long-lasting. And but again, it goes back to having that leadership give the authority back to the team and say, in this special instance, you actually get a chance to decide your own, decisions, and that's very empowering. And some people don't even believe it. We've had to kind of convince people, like, no, your leadership is actually letting you, because we've had the question, oh, they're just going to rearrange us again because they didn't like this configuration. And that was something that the leader was bought into from the beginning. They realized, wow, this is a team I never expected to form this way, and I'm going to let it be. And the people who formed into that team felt the empowerment in that specific instance. And they said, wow, they actually trust us to make a decision about who we should work with. So I think that has a lasting impression.
Yeah, and I think it's what's coming forward for me, if you're talking about authority structures, which is you're delegating your authority. So if I'm going to misquote Richard, so please forgive me, but I think he said leadership requires no small amount of emotional maturity or maturity in general.
Right.
So this is something that we're actually going to have to spend some time with the leader, which is, what does it mean to give away your authority in this very specific way? Like, you can let 150 people organize and you not have any say in it, other than that you're going to say you trust them. But
then give them a big thing to accomplish, right? So the leader is involved in scoping this, the purpose of this team of teams, right? But then letting them run with it and how they're going to make that happen. Yeah.
I just wanted to tell you, Gabe, something I think you'll appreciate and maybe don't know, which is that many years ago, Richard Hackman was working with People Express Airlines. He was intimately involved in the design of that very intentionally self-managing, self-designing organization. And that was the way that they formed teams. They did self-organization practices, and even in the operations, it was teams forming in a big room with the managers there, by stepping toward the manager that they particularly wanted to work with. So that whole practice has a hell of a history. A lot of people are not aware that Richard was something of what I would call a closet practitioner. He was mainly known as a scholar, but he was doing a lot of work and intervention around building effective teams in a lot of different contexts.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, guys, great stuff. I have the feeling, coming out of this episode that we've just scratched the surface. It's a bit of the tip of the iceberg. And I know trying to boil down organizational agility and the 6 conditions in one 45-minute or so episode is challenging. So, but hopefully this, kind of builds some appetite, was a little bit of an appetizer for folks out there. I imagine more to come from you guys in terms of, publications, courses, other kinds of things out there on this topic. But for folks who want to get going, I know I've studied under you guys. I've taken courses from you in Kanban, in the Okaloa Flow Lab. So I've learned a lot of stuff that has just really all around visual management. Helping teams visualize their work has been a huge game changer. And so that's a really core part of my practice. And so you guys have had a profound influence on me and then all the teams that I've been working. So I want to salute you and thank you for that. But where could people go to learn more? Do you have any recommendations of things people could read? Whether it's about organizational agility, about the 6 conditions, about what resources you would recommend for folks out there?
Yeah, so I'll start. So can't recommend Richard's book, Leading Teams, Setting a Stage for Great Performances, enough because just the body alone is fine, but you have to reread it all over again because there's so many nuggets in there. But then if you're a nerd like me, then you're going to follow the footnotes and the bibliography. So there's way more rich stuff in there. That's a nice jumping point. I always recommend a great book. Krister, you've read it or done it a few times. Sure. Personal Kanban by Jim Benson. It's a way for you to start. It introduces a lot of great agile concepts, a lot of things in there that help you start practicing it for you yourself, and then can start to help share it with others and even extend it to a team. And lastly, a book that I think it just came out last year, Outcomes Over Outputs by Josh Seiden. So just lots of agile concepts written in there, but also from a quantitative point of view, how do you manage quantitatively? Reframe give the purpose some life and some telemetry. I think is really useful in that book.
Adam, what would you add?
And I'll add on to, and again, echo Gabe's mention on you can't not recommend Richard Hackman's book. It's again, that's what led us to the 6 conditions and a great opportunity to meet Ruth.
And when you're done, you're going to read Ruth's book, which is great.
Yeah, you have to read Ruth's book, leading senior teams. But the book that I would actually recommend most recently that kind of struck a chord with me is actually a book by General McChrystal. Now, most people know the typical book that most people have read is The Team of Teams. He has another book out there. It's called Leaders, Myth and Reality. And I'm gonna give you the insight on how to read this book. It covers a lot of history. He pairs different historical figures to kind of talk about a specific context. What I recommend is if you're going to read this book, skip to the last 2 chapters first. Listen to those first 2 chapters. I listen through audiobooks. Read those 2 chapters first, then go back to the beginning. It gives you a different perspective on the whole book. Essentially, what the last 2 chapters really talk about is a summation of what he's getting at, is that leadership is an attribute of a system. And that kind of goes back to my introduction. I'm very, this what really struck a chord with me, is that you gain leadership from within the system. Leadership is a quality or an attribute that comes out of the system when it's needed. And he talks about, the great man myth, right? So he talks about a story where it's always looking to one person to solve a problem or to end a crisis or whatever. But really why those particular people are successful was they were at the right place in the right time, and they had the leadership attributes that were given to them by the system of the people. I've actually even run an exercise based on this concept. I had an opportunity to do a workshop where I gave people different points in time. Examples I use, like Harriet Tubman, leading the Underground Railroad. I had JFK and, leading us through the Bay of Pigs and all. And I said, can you tell me what are the great things that came out of these leaders at that time for that situation? And they listed it all out. I was like, great. And I said, all right, great. Now let's all switch the names on all of these contexts and replace them with different people. So Neil Armstrong goes here, Terry Tubman goes here. How do you think they would do in that situation?
Nice.
And again, it's a different context. So you can't always say it's just because it's that one person. They could lead, any particular context. They were the right person at the right time within the situation that the system needed them to be that leader. So it just blew my mind thinking about that. So sorry,
I'll refrain from making link ups to our world right now, because I think what we're seeing now is that we need a new kind of leadership. And I even wonder whether it's individual leadership, but the world needs collective leadership at this time. Yes. And we're seeing so many national leaders, but international organizations that are not fit for purpose because they emerged in a different context. And now there's a misfit between the demands the contexts are having and what these leaders are capable of bringing, right? Which maybe before was more or less effective, but now is wholly, it's ineffective, right? So, So Ruth, you want to sum this up here and take us home, and we'll close out this episode. Thanks, guys, for coming today. It's really rich stuff, and I could go all day long just talking with you guys. And I'm looking forward to a book or a course or articles or podcasts or something to
stay tuned,
where you capture and download all of your knowledge. But
right, and to teach others more about what we just started a conversation about today, which is the relationship between the kind of work that you do and what the 6 conditions framework brings to that, and how much more we can do to develop effective teams of teams. So I just wanted to express my gratitude for the chance to learn from you and with you, and really appreciate your being part of the conversation today. So thanks, and it's been a great pleasure.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Krister, for this opportunity.
Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for coming. We'll put links to you guys on LinkedIn in the show notes for this episode, which people can find at 6teamconditions.com. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode of the 6 Conditions podcast. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. For show notes, links to great resources mentioned in the podcast, and for more information, go to 6teamconditions.com. See you next time on the 6 Conditions podcast.